Never stop reading the Bible. Welcome. Today we're going to jump into some truly timeless guidance that was given to a young, growing church in the ancient, bustling, and really complex city of Corinth. See, the believers in Corinth were dealing with a ton of real-world problems. They'd actually written a letter to the Apostle Paul, basically asking for help on how to navigate a culture that, well, often clashed with their new faith. These weren't just abstract ideas. These were issues that popped up in every part of their lives, from who they married to what they could eat. Okay, so let's dive into their first big question, which Paul tackles in chapter 7. And it's a topic that's just as relevant now as it was then: marriage and being single. Now, this is really interesting. Some folks in the Corinthian church had taken on this very strict view, teaching that to be truly spiritual, you basically had to shut down all physical desires. But Paul comes in with a much more balanced and honestly compassionate perspective. He makes it clear that both marriage and singleness are good gifts from God. One isn't automatically holier than the other.
And this is the crucial point, right here. Paul's advice wasn't about trying to fit everyone into the same box. He's saying, look, your marital status doesn't define your spiritual worth. What really matters is being faithful to God right where you are in whatever situation you were in when you first started following Him.
Okay, let's move on to the next big thing. And this one was a huge source of conflict and confusion for them. It all centered around a daily question: can you eat food that's been sacrificed to idols? It's kind of hard for us to imagine, but you have to picture ancient Corinth. Idol worship was everywhere. Social events were often in temples, and pretty much all the meat you'd find in the market had first been offered to a pagan god. So this created a constant dilemma for believers. Is it okay to eat this meat? Or are you accidentally participating in idol worship? So Paul breaks this down with just brilliant clarity. First, he starts with knowledge. He agrees, hey, an idol isn't a real god, so the meat is just meat. Technically, you're free to eat it. But then, and this is key, he adds a second step: consideration. Using that freedom might seriously confuse or upset another believer whose conscience is a little more sensitive. And that leads to the ultimate principle: love, not just your knowledge of what's allowed, has to be your guide. And this quote just powerfully illustrates his whole point. Paul makes this really personal declaration. He's saying he would happily give up his own freedom, his right to eat meat, for good, if it meant protecting someone else's faith. You see? Being right just wasn't as important as being loving. You know, this whole idea of selfless action flows right into our next section, from chapter 9. Here, Paul actually uses his own life as a prime example while he's defending his authority as an apostle. So apparently some people in Corinth were questioning his authority. Paul reminds them of his qualifications, not because he was being proud, but to set the stage for a much bigger point. He just lays out the facts. I saw the risen Jesus, he sent me himself, and my work has produced real, tangible results. Now, he had every right to be defended, to be respected, and to be financially supported by the church. But just like with the whole idols meat issue, he wasn't just trying to win an argument or demand his rights. He was showing them a totally different way to lead. And this really brings it all home. You can see Paul living out the very principle he was teaching. He chose to give up his right to be paid for his ministry. And why would he do that? To remove any barrier, any obstacle that might keep someone from hearing the message of the gospel. He wanted his motives to be crystal clear. So when you look at these 3 chapters, on marriage, on food, on leadership, they're all dealing with really different situations, but they're all pointing to one powerful overarching principle for how to live. And here it is. You could call it Christ-centered liberty. This is the core takeaway. True freedom in this way of thinking isn't just about doing whatever you want. It's the profound freedom to choose to serve a higher purpose, to look out for the good of others, and to help spread the good news. So Paul's advice to the church in Corinth really leaves us with this powerful question for ourselves. It challenges us to look at our own lives, our knowledge, our rights, our choices, and instead of asking, what am I allowed to do? We start asking, how can what I do serve and build up the people around me? It's a question that completely changes how we think about freedom every single day. This explainer was brought to you by the Center Studio.